Javier Torres, a driven millionaire businessman, built his empire at any cost until the son he never knew appeared at his wedding rehearsal. His life was turned upside down by a truth money could never fix. Before we dive into the story, let's do what Sleepless in Seattle taught us. Share where you're listening from. Comment below. The Miami skyline glows gold against the December sunset as Javier Torres adjusts his collar in the floor-to-ceiling windows of his penthouse office. His reflection shows the same immaculate image he's cultivated over years of careful ambition. Tailored Brioni suit, precisely trimmed hair, the confidence of a man who has bent the world to his will. Beyond the glass, construction cranes punctuate the horizon like exclamation points, each one marking another Torres development project reshaping the city. He checks his Patek Philippe watch, a gift to himself after closing his first billion-dollar deal. The holiday gala begins in an hour, and Amelia will expect everything to be perfect. The thought of his fiancée brings a slight tension to his shoulders. Even after 2 years together, her exacting standards still make him feel like the scholarship kid trying to fit in at business school. Señor Torres. Martine appears in the doorway, tablet in hand. The caterers are ready for final approval, and the band is setting up. Should I have them start with traditional holiday music or the jazz quartet? Jazz first, Javier says, straightening his tie. Save the traditional songs for after dinner, and make sure they know nothing too festive. This is a business event, not a family party. The words catch in his throat, stirring memories of different holiday celebrations. His mother's tamales steaming in the kitchen, his father leading everyone in carols, the warmth of tradition untainted by networking opportunities. He pushes the thoughts aside. That life belongs to a different Javier Torres, one who didn't understand the price of success. Downstairs, his mansion's grand foyer sparkles with thousands of tiny lights woven through imported garland. Ice sculptures catch and scatter the glow, their crystalline surfaces reflecting the wealth that surrounds them. The first guests arrive precisely on schedule. Board members, politicians, real estate moguls, each one representing a carefully cultivated connection. Javier greets them with practiced charm, switching effortlessly between English and Spanish as needed. His accent, once carefully hidden, now serves as an asset, a reminder of how far he's come, a point of connection with Miami's powerful Latino community. He catches fragments of conversation as he moves through the crowd. The Torres Marina project is revolutionary. Did you see the quarterly projections? The wedding is going to be the event of the season. Amelia appears at his side, her presence announced by the subtle scent of Chanel and the whisper of silk against marble. She slides her hand into the crook of his arm, her diamond engagement ring catching the light. Everything is perfect, mi amor, she murmurs. Though perhaps next year we should consider the Four Seasons instead. Some of the guests were commenting on the drive to Coral Gables. Javier's jaw tightens, but his smile remains fixed. My home is perfectly situated. If they don't like the drive, they're welcome to skip next year's event. The words come out sharper than intended, and he feels Amelia's fingers press into his arm. A warning. Of course, she says smoothly. I only meant, ladies and gentlemen. Javier raises his voice, cutting off whatever criticism was coming. Thank you all for joining us this evening. The crowd quiets, faces turning toward him expectantly. This is where he shines, commanding attention, projecting the success story they all want to believe in. He leads them through his carefully prepared speech, hitting each point with precision. Gratitude for their support, excitement for the upcoming year's projects, a toast to continued prosperity. And, of course, he adds, drawing Amelia closer, a special thank you to my beautiful fiancée, who makes everything in my life more elegant. The guests laugh appreciatively. Amelia beams, every inch the perfect partner for Miami's rising star. But as the evening progresses, a restlessness builds under Javier's skin. He excuses himself from a conversation about property values and steps out onto the poolside terrace. The December air carries a hint of coolness, a whisper of the season that means little in South Florida. String lights reflect off the pool's surface, creating constellations that ripple with each breeze. Behind him, the party continues. Classical music, polite laughter, the clink of expensive crystal, all the trappings of the life he's built. Yet standing here, surrounded by evidence of his success, Javier feels the weight of something missing, something that can't be measured in square footage or profit margins. The memory rises unbidden. Sarah's laugh, real and unrestrained, nothing like the careful social titters inside. The way her eyes crinkled at the corners when she smiled. The simple joy of their shared dreams before his became too big for their small hometown. There you are. Amelia's voice breaks through his reverie. Senator Martinez is asking about the zoning changes for the downtown project. Javier straightens, adjusting his cuffs. Of course, we shouldn't keep him waiting. He follows her inside, leaving the memory of Sarah's smile to dissolve in the Miami night. Morning finds him in his home office, surrounded by the evidence of his ambition. Awards line the walls, each one marking another step up the ladder of success. Martin moves efficiently through his daily briefing, scheduling meetings, confirming appointments, managing the 1,000 details that keep the Torres empire running. The meeting with the wedding planner is at 2, Martin says, scrolling through his tablet, and Senora Rodriguez's assistant called to confirm the family dinner tomorrow night. Javier nods, only half listening as he sorts through a stack of papers on his desk. His hand freezes, a photograph slips free from between 2 contracts. The edges are worn, the colors slightly faded. Sarah at 18, her dark hair wild in the coastal wind, looking at him like he held all the answers. Senor Torres? Martin's voice seems to come from very far away. Should I confirm the dinner? Yes, fine. Javier shoves the photo into a drawer, but the image lingers in his mind. What else? The New Year's Eve wedding preparations are on schedule. The guest list is nearly finalized, though there's still some... A knock at the door interrupts them. Amelia enters without waiting for a response, elegant even in casual designer wear. Mi amor, we need to discuss the seating arrangements. The Petersons can't be near the Richardsons after that nasty hostile takeover, and... She stops, noticing his distraction. Is everything all right? Just work, Javier says, closing the drawer with more force than necessary. The downtown project is at a crucial stage. Amelia's perfectly shaped eyebrows draw together. You're always at a crucial stage with something, but our wedding is important too. I need you to focus. I am focused. Javier stands, needing to move. Everything will be perfect, just like you want. Like we want? She corrects, but there's a question in her voice. That evening, at a dinner party hosted by one of his investors, Javier half listens to a discussion about market trends until a familiar name catches his attention. Sarah Martinez, someone is saying. Yes, she's back in Miami, teaching at that community center in Little Havana, still as idealistic as ever. Javier's hand tightens around his wine glass. You've seen her? The speaker, James Chen, he remembers, real estate law, nods. Ran into her last week. She's doing well for herself, all things considered. Not all of us can be real estate moguls, eh? The casual dismissal in Chen's tone stirs something protective in Javier's chest. Before he can respond, Amelia appears at his side. Darling, the Andersons want to discuss their daughter's quinceañera. Apparently, they loved what we did with the garden for the gala. Javier allows himself to be led away, but Sarah's name echoes in his mind. She's here, in his city. The thought throws him off balance in a way he hasn't felt since leaving their hometown behind. That night, after Amelia has gone home, he finds himself opening his laptop, typing Sarah's name into the search bar. The results paint a modest picture. Teacher, community advocate, quoted in a few local articles about education reform. No mention of wealth or status, but there's something in her smile and the grainy newspaper photo that tugs at him. She looks content. At peace in a way he hasn't felt despite all his achievements. Add her to the wedding list, he tells Martin the next morning, not looking up from his papers. Senor? Sara Martinez. The name feels strange on his tongue after so long. Send her an invitation to the wedding. Martin's hesitation is barely noticeable. As you wish, Senor Torres. The invitation leads to a phone call that leaves Javier more unsettled than he'd like to admit. Sarah's voice is different, deeper, more measured, but still carries that hint of warmth he remembers. A wedding invitation, Javier? After all this time? I thought, given our history. He trails off, realizing he hasn't actually thought this through. You were an important part of my life once. Once, she agrees, and he can't read her tone. Well, thank you for thinking of me. I'll be there. The call ends before he can say more. leaving him with the unsettling feeling that he's set something in motion he can't control. The rehearsal dinner arrives on a warm December evening, the restaurant's private room filled with their closest friends and family. Javier stands at the head of the table, champagne in hand, preparing to toast his future with Emilia. The door opens, and his words die in his throat. Sarah enters looking elegant but understated in a simple blue dress. But it's not her appearance that steals his breath. It's the small boy holding her hand, no more than 7 or 8 years old. A boy with Javier's eyes, his grandmother's nose, and an expression of curiosity that mirrors his own at that age. The champagne glass slips from his fingers, crystal shattering against hardwood. In the sudden silence, Sarah's voice cuts clear and quiet. "Javier, I'd like you to meet someone." The boy looks up at him with innocent interest, unaware that his existence has just shattered every careful plan, every pristine vision of the future that Javier has built. In those familiar eyes, Javier sees the price of his ambition reflected back at him, and for the first time in years, he feels truly afraid. "Javier." Sarah's voice cuts through the chaos in his mind. "We need to talk." He follows her to a quiet corner of the restaurant's garden, his legs moving automatically. The Miami night wraps around them, heavy with jasmine and unspoken words. Music from the rehearsal dinner drifts out, a distant reminder of the life he's supposed to be celebrating. "His name is Esteban," Sarah says quietly, watching the koi pond rather than his face. "He's 7 years old. The math isn't difficult." Javier's throat tightens. "Why didn't you tell me?" "I tried." There's no accusation in her voice, just a bone-deep wariness. "The day you left for London, I came to tell you, but you were so excited about the opportunity, so certain that leaving was the right choice. You talked about cutting ties with everything that might hold you back." She pauses, the words hanging between them. "Including me." Memories flood back, his desperate enthusiasm about the London position, his conviction that success required sacrifice. He'd been so focused on proving himself, on becoming someone worthy of respect, that he'd missed what was right in front of him. "I have a son," he whispers, the words foreign on his tongue. Through the garden doors, he can see Esteban sitting with Emilia's young cousins, laughing at something one of them has said. The boy's smile is Sarah's, but the way he holds himself, the slight tilt of his head, Javier sees himself in every movement. "You had a son," Sarah corrects gently. "Whether you have one now depends on what you do next." Inside, the party continues. His carefully orchestrated future waits for him, the merger of families and fortunes, the next step up the ladder of success. But out here in the garden, surrounded by the scent of jasmine and the weight of his choices, Javier Torres realizes that all his achievements have led him to this moment of reckoning. The boy laughs again, the sound carrying through the glass doors, and Javier feels something crack in his chest. The protective shell of ambition and pride giving way to a truth he can no longer ignore. He has spent years building an empire of glass and steel, never realizing that his greatest legacy was growing up without him. Javier's fingers drum against the mahogany bar as he watches Sarah guide Esteban through the crowd. The boy's small hand clasped in hers, his dark eyes, Javier's eyes, taking in the opulent surroundings of the restaurant's private dining room. The crystal chandeliers cast fractured light across Esteban's features, highlighting every damning similarity. "What the hell were you thinking?" Javier's voice comes out sharp as he pulls Sarah aside, away from the murmur of rehearsal dinner conversation. The restaurant's garden terrace offers privacy, but the jasmine-scented air feels suffocating. Showing up like this, bringing him here without warning. Warning? Sarah's composure only fuels his anger. She stands straight-backed in her simple blue dress, unimpressed by his rage. "Like the warning you gave me before leaving for London? That was different. This is manipulation, using a child too." "To what, Javier?" Her voice remains steady, but her eyes flash. "To ruin your perfect wedding? Your carefully crafted image?" She glances through the glass doors where Esteban sits with Emilia's young cousins. He deserved to know his father, even if his father never wanted to know him. The words hit like a physical blow. "I didn't know." "You didn't want to know." Sarah smooths her dress, a gesture he remembers from their college days when she was gathering her thoughts. "I tried to tell you that last day, but you were so excited about London. about cutting ties with everything that might hold you back. Her lips twist, including me. Javier turns away, unable to face the truth in her words. The Miami skyline glitters beyond the garden, each light representing another piece of the empire he's built, an empire that suddenly feels hollow. He stalks away from Sarah, past curious glances and whispered conversations, until he reaches the restaurant's main terrace. The December air carries a hint of salt from the nearby ocean, doing nothing to clear his head. Below, valets scurry to park luxury cars, while inside, his carefully orchestrated future continues without him. "Everything all right, mi amor?" Amelia appears in the doorway, elegant in her cream cocktail dress. "The sommelier needs your approval on the wine pairings." "Fine." He forces his features into practiced smoothness. "Just needed some air. Wedding stress." Amelia's perfectly manicured hand squeezes his arm. "Don't worry. Everything will be perfect." She disappears back inside, leaving him alone with thoughts he can't escape. His phone buzzes. Martine's name on the screen. Javier hits accept, desperate for someone who might understand. "I need you on the terrace, now." Martine appears minutes later, tablet tucked under his arm like always. But tonight, his usually efficient demeanor softens with concern. "Señor Torres?" "She brought her son." The words scrape his throat. "No, my son, our son, 7 years old, Martin, 7 fucking years." Understanding dawns on Martine's face. He sets his tablet aside, a rare gesture that signals his shift from employee to friend. "Are you certain? Look at him." Javier gestures through the glass where Esteban's laugh rings out at something one of the other children has said. "He has my mother's smile, my grandfather's chin." His hands clench the terrace railing. "How did I not know?" With respect, Martine's voice is gentle but firm. Perhaps the better question is, what will you do now that you do know? "Do?" Javier barks a laugh. "What can I do? I'm getting married in 3 days. The merger with Emilia's family will double our development projects. Everything is in motion. Everything except your conscience, it seems." Javier shoots him a sharp look, but Martine doesn't back down. In 15 years of friendship, he's earned the right to speak hard truths. "Running from this won't make it disappear," Martine continues. "The boy exists. He's your blood. Ignoring him won't change that. I'm not ignoring anything. I'm protecting what I've built." "Are you?" Martine picks up his tablet, professional mask sliding back into place. "Or are you hiding from what you've destroyed?" The question follows Javier into the next morning as he throws himself into wedding preparations. The Four Seasons ballroom bustles with activity, florists arranging imported roses, technicians adjusting lighting, waiters practicing their synchronized service. He moves through it all in a daze, nodding at Amelia's questions about centerpieces and place cards. "The orchids should be more prominent," she decides, frowning at an arrangement. "Don't you think, mi amor? Whatever you prefer." His attention drifts to his phone, thumb hovering over Sarah's contact information. He'd saved it after their confrontation, telling himself it was practical to have it. "Javier?" Amelia's tone sharpens. "Are you even listening?" "Of course." He pockets the phone, pasting on a smile. "The orchids. They're perfect." Her eyes narrow, but before she can press further, his Aunt Rosa approaches, beaming. "Sobrino, such elegant choices." She kisses his cheek, then pauses. "You know, that little boy at the rehearsal dinner. What was his name?" Javier's chest tightens. "Esteban." "Yes, Esteban. He reminded me so much of you at that age. The same serious expression when he's thinking." Rosa laughs. "And those eyes, just like your father's." From the corner of his vision, Javier sees Amelia go still. Her hand freezes on the orchid she'd been adjusting, head tilting slightly to catch every word. "Must be a coincidence," Javier says quickly. "If you'll excuse me, I need to check on the cake delivery." He escapes to his office, but the sanctuary of glass and steel offers no peace. The photo of Sarah from their college days seems to mock him from his desk drawer. He pulls it out, studying her younger self. Dark hair wild in the coastal wind, eyes bright with dreams they'd shared before his became too big for both of them. His phone chimes with a message from Sarah. "We need to talk. I'm bringing Esteban to the community center tomorrow. Come if you want to know your son." The words blur on the screen. His son. The reality of it hits him anew with each repetition. He has a son who's grown up without him, who's celebrated 7 birthdays, lost baby teeth, taken first steps, all while Javier chased success in gleaming office towers. Working late, Amelia's voice makes him jump. She stands in the doorway, something guarded in her expression. The wedding planner needs your signature on the final timeline. Right. He shoves the photo back into the drawer, but not before Amelia's gaze catches on it. That wasn't me. A statement, not a question. An old photo, from college. The boy's mother? The question hangs between them, sharp as broken glass. Javier says nothing, but his silence is answer enough. Amelia's heels click against marble as she approaches his desk. Is there something you need to tell me, mi amor? Nothing that matters. The lie tastes bitter. The past is the past. But the past refuses to stay buried. The next morning finds him outside Sarah's office at the community center, a modest building in Little Havana that stands in stark contrast to his corporate headquarters. Through the window, he watches Sarah lead a group of children in what appears to be an art project. Esteban sits among them, his dark head bent in concentration over his work. She said you might come. A voice startles him. An older woman, the center's director, he assumes, studies him with knowing eyes. Sarah's been doing wonderful work here, helping children from immigrant families adjust, just like her son. The pointed emphasis on those last words makes Javier's jaw clench. I have a meeting. Of course you do. The woman's disappointment feels heavier than Amelia's suspicion or Martine's judgment. Running away must be a habit by now. Pride makes him step through the door instead of retreating to his waiting car. The classroom smells of paint and paper and possibility. Sarah looks up, surprise flickering across her features before she masks it. Class, continue with your projects, she tells the children. I'll be right back. She leads Javier to a small office, closing the door on curious stares. I wasn't sure you'd come. I'm not here to disrupt his life. The words come out defensive. Or yours. Then why are you here? The question strips away his rehearsed responses. Through the office window, he watches Esteban carefully clean his paintbrush, the same methodical focus Javier remembers from his own childhood. I don't know, he admits finally. Sarah's expression softens slightly. I'm taking him back to Tampa after the holidays. My teaching position there starts in January. She pauses. This is your chance, Javier. Your only chance to explain to your son why his father chose success over family. I didn't choose. He stops, the lie dying in his throat. I didn't know about him. Would it have mattered if you did? The question hits its mark. 7 years ago, would the knowledge of his unborn child have changed his trajectory? Would he have chosen differently, valued love over ambition, family over fortune? I want to meet him, he says instead of answering. Properly. Sarah studies him for a long moment. Tomorrow. My apartment. But Javier? Her voice hardens. Don't make promises you won't keep. He's had enough disappointment. The meeting haunts him through another day of wedding preparations. He moves through cake tastings and seating chart revisions like a man underwater, everything muffled by the weight of his choices. That evening, his phone conversation with Martine stretches longer than usual. I don't know how to be a father, he confesses, pacing his penthouse balcony. Perhaps start by being present, Martine suggests. The rest. Javier? Amelia's voice cuts through the night air. She stands in the doorway, still dressed from their dinner with her parents, devastation written across her features. What did you just say? The phone slips from his grip. Behind Amelia, the Miami skyline continues its endless glitter, indifferent to the way his carefully constructed world is crumbling. Mi amor, he starts, but she holds up a hand. Don't. Her voice trembles. Just tell me the truth. For once in our relationship, tell me the truth. The words stick in his throat, but her eyes demand honesty. Sarah's son, he's mine. I didn't know until the rehearsal dinner, I swear. But you've known since then. Amelia's laugh holds no humor. All these days of planning our future, and you've been hiding a son. I was trying to protect. Protect what? Your image? Our merger? She yanks her engagement ring off, the diamond catching moonlight as it falls to the balcony floor. Did you think I wouldn't find out? That you could just pretend he doesn't exist? Amelia, please. I've already called my father. Her voice turns to ice. He'll be reviewing all contracts between our companies first thing tomorrow. She turns to leave, then pauses. You know what's ironic? I actually thought you were different. That under all the ambition and pride, there was someone real. The door closes behind her with devastating finality. Javier stares at the abandoned ring, its perfect clarity now seeming like a mockery of the flaws in his character. His phone buzzes. Martin, probably wondering about their disconnected call. Instead, he finds a message from Sarah. Esteban asked about you today. Said he liked your smile. The simple text brings him to his knees more effectively than Emilia's departure. Somewhere in this city, a 7-year-old boy with his eyes and his mother's smile is thinking about him, wondering about him, perhaps even hoping to know him. The ring glints on the balcony floor, a diamond as cold and perfect as the life he's built. Below, Miami traffic flows like a river of light, each car carrying someone toward home and family, while Javier Torres, with all his wealth and power, stands alone in the darkness of his own making. His phone rings again, Eduardo Rodriguez's name flashing on the screen. Javier considers letting it go to voicemail, but he owes Emilia's father at least this much. He answers, "You've made quite a mess, hijo." Eduardo's voice carries the casual menace of a man used to getting his way. Our lawyers are reviewing every contract, every deal, every piece of paper between our companies. This is personal, Eduardo. It shouldn't affect business. Everything affects business. Ice cubes clink against glass on the other end of the line. You think our investors will trust a man who hides a secret child? Who brings scandal to both our families days before the wedding? I didn't know about him, which makes you either a liar or a fool. Eduardo sighs. Fix this, Javier. Send the woman and her boy away. Make it clear they have no claim on you or your future. Otherwise, he lets the threat hang unspoken. Or what? Javier's voice hardens. You'll pull out of our developments? Break ground elsewhere? Oh, much worse. Eduardo's tone turns almost pitying. I'll make sure every bank, every investor, every business contact in Miami knows exactly why the Torres-Rodriguez merger failed. How the great Javier Torres isn't the man they thought he was. Another clink of ice. You have until tomorrow to make this right. The line goes dead. Javier stares at his phone, Eduardo's ultimatum echoing in his head. His empire, everything he's built, balanced against a 7-year-old boy's smile. The choice should be simple. Protect his business, his reputation, the future he's worked so hard to create. But Esteban's eyes haunt him, his mother's smile. 7 years of birthdays and first days and scraped knees that he can never get back. The weight of it all presses down on his chest until he can barely breathe. He picks up Emilia's ring from the balcony floor, its perfect facets catching the city lights. In its reflection, he sees the man he's become, successful, powerful, and utterly alone. The kind of man who would choose wealth over his own blood, ambition over love, pride over responsibility. The kind of man his father would be ashamed to know. The realization hits him like a physical blow. He stumbles to his desk, pulling out the photo of Sarah from their college days. Her younger self stares back at him, full of dreams and trust he didn't deserve. Beside it, his phone lights up with another message from her. Esteban drew a picture today of you, him, and me. He asked if he could give it to you. The words blur as tears he didn't expect burn his eyes. Somewhere in this city, his son is drawing pictures of the family they could be, while Javier sits in his tower of glass and steel, surrounded by everything money can buy and nothing that truly matters. Dawn finds him still at his desk, Emilia's ring in one hand and Sarah's photo in the other, the weight of his choices pressing down like chains of his own making. The Miami sunrise paints his empire in shades of gold, but for the first time in his life, Javier Torres wonders if the price of ambition might be too high to pay. The Miami skyline blazes with New Year's Eve fireworks, but Javier Torres sees none of it. He stands in his penthouse office 40 stories above the celebration, staring at a photograph that threatens to unravel everything he's built. Esteban's smile beams up at him from the glossy surface, a candid shot from their tense meeting days ago. The boy's eyes, so much like his own, hold an innocence that makes Javier's chest ache. He sets his crystal tumbler down harder than necessary, amber liquid sloshing against the sides. The quiet clink echoes through the empty office, a sound that would normally be lost in the bustle of business hours. Tonight, it feels like an accusation. His phone buzzes again, another message from Emilia about the wedding preparations. He doesn't need to read it to know its contents. Guest lists, Seating arrangements, society photographers, all the careful orchestration of a union meant to cement his place among Miami's elite. He lets it go unanswered. Instead, his gaze drifts to the construction site visible through the floor-to-ceiling windows. The Torres Marina project rises from the waterfront like a concrete promise, sleek lines and modern angles that will reshape the skyline. It should fill him with pride. Instead, he sees only hollow achievements, towers built on foundations of missed moments and abandoned responsibilities. What am I doing? The words escape in a whisper, fogging the glass. Beyond his reflection, fireworks continue to paint the sky in bursts of gold and red. Each explosion illuminates the evidence of his success. The marina project, the downtown developments, the carefully cultivated image of the self-made man. Yet standing here surrounded by it all, he feels more lost than he did as a scholarship kid fighting for respect in business school. The photo draws his attention again. Esteban's joy seems to mock the sterile perfection of the office, the careful distance Javier maintains from anything that might complicate his rise to the top. 7 years of his son's life, gone. First steps, first words, first day of school, all sacrificed on the altar of ambition. His hand hovers over the phone. Emilia's message still waits for a response, along with dozens of others about the wedding. Instead, he finds himself scrolling to Sarah's number. He saved it after their last conversation, though he told himself he wouldn't need it again. The decision forms before he can talk himself out of it. He grabs his keys, leaving the tumbler of scotch untouched on his desk. The elevator descent feels endless, each floor marking another chance to turn back, to retreat to the safety of his carefully constructed world. But Esteban's smile haunts him, a reminder of everything he's missed while chasing success. Sarah's neighborhood is a stark contrast to the sleek high-rises of downtown Miami. Here, modest homes line quiet streets, their holiday decorations more authentic than artistic. Christmas lights still twinkle on palm trees and balconies, their warm glow a far cry from the calculated elegance of his own holiday display. He finds her building a well-maintained but unremarkable apartment complex and sits in his Porsche, engine idling. Through a ground-floor window, he catches glimpses of movement. A small Christmas tree stands in the corner, its decorations clearly chosen with a child's enthusiasm rather than an interior designer's eye. The sight stirs something in his chest, a memory of his own childhood Christmases, before success became his only measure of worth. Before he can lose his nerve, Javier kills the engine and steps out into the warm night air. The fireworks are more distant here, but their light still catches on his watch, the Patek Philippe that suddenly feels like it weighs 1,000 pounds. Sarah answers his knock with surprise that quickly shifts to wariness. She's dressed casually in jeans and a simple blouse, her dark hair pulled back in a loose ponytail. The sight of her like this, unguarded, authentic, makes his throat tight. Javier? She doesn't open the door fully. What are you doing here? Before he can answer, a blur of motion appears behind her. Mama, who is it? Can I show them my drawing? Esteban squeezes past Sarah, clutching a piece of paper. His face lights up with recognition. Mr. Torres, look what I made. He thrusts the paper forward proudly. The drawing shows 3 figures, clearly meant to be Javier, Sarah, and Esteban, standing together under a rainbow. The simplicity of it, the hopeful imagination of a child who doesn't yet understand the complexities of adult relationships, makes Javier's carefully maintained composure crack. It's wonderful, he manages, his voice rougher than intended. May I come in? Sarah studies him for a long moment, then steps aside. For a little while, we were just about to start our New Year's tradition. The apartment is small but warm, filled with evidence of a life well lived. Photos line the walls, Esteban through the years, achievements Javier should have witnessed. A bookshelf overflows with children's stories and textbooks, Sarah's teaching materials mixed with Esteban's homework. Everything speaks of love, of presence, of the daily work of building a family. Can Mr. Torres stay for the grapes, Mama? Esteban bounces on his toes, excitement radiating from every movement. Please? Sarah's expression softens as she looks at their son. That's up to Mr. Torres. He probably has other plans for New Year's Eve. I don't, Javier says quickly. Too quickly. He clears his throat. I mean, I'd like to stay, if that's all right. What's this about grapes? Esteban's face lights up. It's for good luck. You eat 12 grapes at midnight, one for each month, but you have to make a wish with each one. Mama says it's a tradition from Spain, but we do it every year. Right, Mama? That's right, mi amor. Sarah's voice carries a hint of something Javier can't quite read. Why don't you go get the grapes ready while I talk to Mr. Torres for a minute? As Esteban rushes to the kitchen, Sarah turns to Javier. Her eyes, once so full of love for him, now hold a careful distance. Why are you really here, Javier? The question hangs between them, heavy with years of unspoken words. Javier looks around the modest apartment again, seeing it with new eyes. While he's been building towers of glass and steel, Sarah has built something far more valuable, a home filled with love and tradition. I've been thinking about what success really means, he says finally. The words come slowly, each one weighted with realization. All these years, I thought it was about proving something, showing everyone who doubted me that I could make it. But sitting in my office tonight, looking at that photo of Esteban, he trails off, struggling to articulate the shift happening in his heart. Sarah's expression softens slightly. You never had anything to prove, Javier. Not to me. All I ever wanted was for you to be present, to choose us over your ambitions, just once. I know that now. The admission costs him something, but it feels right. I've spent years chasing a kind of success that leaves no room for what really matters. Seeing you and Esteban tonight, in this home you've built. He gestures to the Christmas tree, the drawings on the fridge, the well-worn couch that speaks of countless storytime sessions. This is real success. This is what I should have been building all along. It's not too late, Sarah says quietly. But Javier, if you want to be part of Esteban's life, part of our lives, it has to be all in. No more choosing ambition over family. No more treating relationships like business transactions. I'm ready, he starts to say, but she holds up a hand. Don't answer now. Think about what it really means. You have a whole life built around status and success, a fiancé who shares those values. Are you really willing to risk all that? Before he can respond, Esteban returns with a bowl of grapes. They're ready. It's almost time. The three of them settle around the small dining table, the bowl of grapes between them. Esteban chatters excitedly about his wishes for the coming year. A new bike, maybe a dog, success in his upcoming science fair. His innocent enthusiasm creates a bubble of warmth that seems to suspend time. As midnight approaches, Sarah explains the tradition more fully. Each grape represents a month of the new year. You eat them as the clock strikes 12, making a wish for each month. But be careful what you wish for. Tradition says they all come true. The first chime of midnight catches them all by surprise. Esteban pops his first grape into his mouth, eyes screwed shut in concentration. Sarah follows suit, her wishes silent but visible in her expression. Javier holds his first grape, looking at his son's face illuminated by fireworks through the window. With each grape, with each wish, Javier feels the weight of his choices, past and future, settling onto his shoulders. By the sixth grape, he knows what he has to do. By the ninth, he's accepted the cost. When the 12th grape passes his lips, his path is clear. The next morning dawns bright and clear, Miami's first sunrise of the year, painting the sky in shades of promise. Javier adjusts his tie as he walks up the path to the Rodriguez estate, his footsteps heavy with purpose. The manicured gardens seem overly artificial now, the carefully pruned topiaries a testament to control rather than natural beauty. Amelia meets him in the conservatory, already dressed for their New Year's Day brunch. Her designer dress and perfectly styled hair speak of the life he's been pursuing, a life of appearances and expectations. Darling, you're early. The guests won't arrive for hours. She moves to kiss his cheek, but he steps back. Something in his expression makes her pause. What's wrong? I can't marry you. The words come out clearer than he expected, weighted with certainty rather than regret. It wouldn't be fair. To you, to me, or to my son. Your son. Amelia's voice turns sharp. So this is about that woman and her child. Javier, think about what you're doing. My family's connections, our planned merger. You're throwing away everything we've built. No. He meets her gaze steadily. I'm choosing to build something else, something real. The silence stretches between them, broken only by the distant sound of birds in the garden. Finally, Amelia's perfectly painted lips curve into a cold smile. You'll regret this. When the dust settles and you realize what you've lost, I've already lost 7 years with my son. Javier turns toward the door, his shoulders straight. I won't lose any more. He's barely reached his car when his phone rings. Eduardo Rodriguez, Emilia's father. He answers it despite knowing what's coming. You've made a serious mistake, Torres. Eduardo's voice carries the weight of his influence in Miami's business community. Our partnership is terminated, effective immediately. The marina project funding will be pulled by end of day. I've already contacted our mutual investors. A series of notifications light up Javier's phone as Eduardo speaks. Emails from board members, investors pulling out, contractors putting projects on hold. The Rodriguez family's influence runs deep in Miami's business circles, and Eduardo is making sure everyone knows about Javier's fall from grace. The Torres name won't mean much in this city after today, Eduardo continues, satisfaction evident in his tone. I hope this personal matter was worth destroying everything you've built. Javier ends the call without responding. His phone continues to buzz with cancellations and withdrawals. 7 years of carefully cultivated business relationships unraveling in real time. In his rearview mirror, he watches the Rodriguez estate recede, along with all the carefully laid plans and connections it represents. The cost will be substantial. Projects delayed, contracts lost, his carefully cultivated image tarnished. The marina project, his crowning achievement, will likely sit half-finished, a monument to what choosing family over ambition has cost him. Yet as he drives toward Sarah's neighborhood, toward the modest apartment where his son is probably just waking up, Javier feels lighter than he has in years. The Miami skyline rises before him, his buildings reaching toward the sky. But for the first time, he sees them for what they are, just structures of glass and steel, empty without the warmth of family to fill them. He thinks of Esteban's drawing now carefully folded in his jacket pocket, 3 figures standing together, a child's hope made visible in crayon and paper. It's time to make that picture real, no matter the cost. The sun climbs higher as Javier parks outside Sarah's apartment building. Through the window, he can see Esteban at the breakfast table, Sarah helping him with what looks like a puzzle. The scene is simple, domestic, real. Worth more than all the towers he's built, all the deals he's made. He reaches for his phone one last time, sending a message to his assistant. Cancel all appointments this week. Family comes first. Then he walks toward the door, toward his son, toward a different kind of success. One measured not in dollars and square footage, but in moments shared and love given. Behind him, the Miami sun catches on glass towers and construction cranes, but Javier Torres doesn't look back. The community park in Little Havana pulses with life on this sunny afternoon. Children's laughter mingles with rapid-fire Spanish conversations, creating infinity reminds Javier of his own childhood. He watches Esteban examine the wooden trompo in his small hands, turning it over with the same methodical curiosity Javier remembers possessing at that age. Like this, Javier demonstrates, wrapping the string around the spinning top with practiced motions. Your abuelo taught me when I was even younger than you. Esteban's eyes track every movement, his expression serious. Did he teach you in Mexico? No, mijo. Right here in Miami. Javier releases the top with a sharp pull. It spins perfectly on the concrete, drawing an appreciative wow from his son. Your grandparents came here before I was born, but they brought these traditions with them. The games, the stories, everything that made us who we are. He hands Esteban another top, watching as small fingers attempt to mimic his technique. The string tangles and frustration flashes across the boy's face. Javier kneels beside him, gently adjusting his grip. It took me weeks to get it right. Your grandfather was very patient. Was he rich like you? Esteban asks, his innocence cutting straight through Javier's carefully constructed facade. No. Javier's throat tightens. He worked construction, built some of the buildings I work in now, but he was rich in other ways, in family, in wisdom. He pauses, choosing his words carefully. I lost sight of that for a while. The top spins successfully this time, and Esteban's delighted laugh echoes across the park. It sounds exactly like Sarah's, that same unrestrained joy that used to make Javier's heart skip. Still does, if he's honest with himself. They spend the afternoon playing loteria, Javier teaching Esteban the traditional riddles that accompany each card. His son's quick mind catches on fast, soon shouting out answers before Javier can finish the clues. Pride swells in his chest, different from any feeling his business successes have ever given him. As the sun begins to set, casting long shadows across the park, Esteban leans against him, tired but content. "Can we do this again, Papa?" The word hits Javier like a physical force. It's the first time Esteban has called him that, and he has to take a moment to steady his voice. "Yes, mijo, as often as you want." Over the next few weeks, Javier builds a routine around Esteban that would have seemed impossible in his old life. He rearranges board meetings to make evening phone calls, moves construction site visits to be available for weekend visits. His calendar, once packed with networking events and business dinners, now includes soccer games and school projects. At Esteban's first soccer game since their reconnection, Javier sits on the metal bleachers, feeling oddly out of place in his casual clothes. The other parents chat comfortably around him, sharing snacks and stories. His designer watch and Italian loafers mark him as different, but Esteban's proud wave as he runs onto the field bridges any gap. "That's my papa," he hears his son tell his teammates during a water break, pointing toward the bleachers. The simple declaration carries more weight than any business introduction ever has. Sarah stands at the opposite end of the field, and their eyes meet briefly. Something shifts in her expression, not quite approval, but perhaps the beginning of acceptance. She's watched him cancel 2 business trips to attend Esteban's games, seen him sit through elementary school science presentations with genuine interest, observed him learning to be present in ways he never was before. "He's different with Esteban," he overhears her telling her sister Isabel after one such game. "More like the Javier I used to know. Before." "Before ambition ate him alive?" Isabel finishes, her tone sharp. "Before he forgot who he was," Sarah corrects quietly. "I'm not ready to trust it completely, but I can't deny he's trying." The conversation cuts off as they notice his approach, but Sarah doesn't retreat as she once would have. Instead, she hands him Esteban's forgotten water bottle with a small nod. He has practice again on Tuesday. "I'll be there," Javier promises, and for the first time, she doesn't look skeptical. But as Javier rebuilds these fragile bonds, his carefully constructed business empire begins to crumble. The first hint comes in a canceled meeting with a major investor, then another. Soon, whispers reach him of Eduardo Rodriguez's systematic campaign against him. Torres lacks moral fiber, the rumors say, abandoned his own child for years. How can we trust him with our investments? Old associates stop returning his calls. Development permits that once would have been rubber-stamped now face unexpected complications. The Torres Marina project, his crowning achievement, stalls as investors pull out one by one. Javier watches his stock portfolio plummet from the same office where he once adjusted his tie and admired his reflection. The view hasn't changed, but he has. The loss of wealth that would have destroyed him months ago now feels almost like penance. He drives to his childhood home in Little Havana, the modest house standing unchanged amid development and gentrification. His mother, Maria, opens the door before he can knock, as if she's been expecting him. "Mama," he starts, but the carefully prepared explanation dissolves as she pulls him into a hug that smells of sofrito and home. Inside, she serves him café con leche in the same chip mug he used as a teenager. The kitchen is small, nothing like his sleek, professional one, but it holds more warmth than his entire penthouse. "Eduardo Rodriguez is destroying everything I built," he tells her, the words bitter on his tongue. "Years of work, gone because I chose my son over his daughter." Maria's weathered hands wrap around her own mug. "And you regret this choice?" "No," Javier answers immediately, surprising himself with his certainty. "But the unfairness of it?" "Life isn't fair, mi amor. Your father and I learned that crossing the border. You learned it earning your place in their world." She reaches across the table to touch his cheek. "The question isn't whether it's fair. It's whether you can face the challenge with dignity. They're tearing down everything I worked for." "No?" Maria's voice carries the quiet authority that shaped his childhood. "They're tearing down what you bought, what you earned through deals and compromises. But the things that matter, your integrity, your love for your son, the man you're becoming, those they cannot touch unless you let them." Javier leans back in the familiar kitchen chair, letting her words sink in. Through the window, he can see the mango tree his father planted when they first bought the house. It still bears fruit every summer, its roots deep and unshakable. I don't know how to rebuild from this, he admits. The same way your father and I did, one day at a time, with faith in what matters most. She stands, moving to the stove to warm more milk. And you have something we didn't, a son watching to see how his father faces adversity. The weight of her words follows him back to his office, where more crisis management awaits. But instead of fighting the rumors or plotting revenge, Javier begins systematically reorganizing his business. He downsizes where necessary, focuses on projects he can complete with reduced funding, and most importantly, never misses a moment with Esteban. Sarah notices the changes in his circumstances, the less flashy car, the canceled business trips, the subtle signs of financial strain. But she also notices that none of it affects his commitment to their son. Later that evening, after Esteban is asleep, Sarah sits with Isabel in her small backyard. The sisters share a bottle of wine, crickets providing background music to their conversation. He seems different, Isabel admits reluctantly, swirling the wine in her glass. But men like Javier don't change overnight. Sarah pulls her knees to her chest, a gesture reminiscent of their teenage years. You didn't see him today at the park, the way he was with Esteban. She trails off, conflict evident in her expression. That's what worries me. Isabel sets her glass down firmly. You're starting to hope again. But what happens when the next business opportunity comes along? When some investor offers him a deal too good to refuse in exchange for moving to New York or London? He's lost millions staying here, Sarah points out. Canceled deals, pulled investments. For now, Isabel interrupts. But you know better than anyone how ambitious he is. It's in his blood, Sarah. The first time he left, it broke you. If he does it again, she reaches for her sister's hand. This time it won't just be you getting hurt. Esteban is old enough now to remember abandonment. Sarah withdraws her hand, standing to pace the small yard. You think I don't know that? Every time I see them together, every time Esteban lights up when Javier calls. She stops, pressing her palms against her eyes. I want to believe he's changed. For Esteban's sake, for all of us. Then believe his actions, not his words, Isabel advises softly. And protect your heart and Esteban's until he proves this change is permanent. Sarah nods slowly, her gaze drifting to Esteban's bedroom window. I am. Trust me, I learned that lesson the hard way. You could fight back, she says one evening as they watch Esteban practice soccer drills. I know you have enough dirt on Eduardo to make him back off. Javier shakes his head. That's not the example I want to set for our son. The word our hangs between them, weighted with possibility and pain. Sarah studies him for a long moment before speaking again. Isabel thinks I'm crazy to trust you, she says finally. She says people don't really change. What do you think? I think. She pauses, choosing her words carefully. I think the Javier I fell in love with is still in there. I see him when you're with Esteban, when you choose him over everything else. Her eyes meet his directly. But I also remember how quickly ambition consumed you before. The truth of her words stings, but Javier accepts it. I was running then, he admits. From my background, from feeling not good enough. I thought success would fix everything. And now? He watches Esteban execute a perfect kick, his face lighting up with achievement. Now I know what real success looks like. That evening, Javier makes a decision. He calls Sarah with an idea that would have seemed impossible months ago, a New Year's Day celebration at her modest home, bringing both their families together. Are you sure? She asks, surprise evident in her voice. It's not exactly the kind of event you're used to hosting. That's exactly why I want to do it, he tells her. It's time to remember who I really am. The day arrives clear and crisp by Miami standards. Javier shows up early, arms full of grocery bags. Sarah's kitchen is a fraction of the size of his, but as he rolls up his sleeves to help prepare the traditional dishes, it feels more like home than any luxury appliance ever has. Her family arrives in waves, aunts, uncles, cousins, all eyeing him with varying degrees of suspicion. But as they watch him making tamales alongside Sarah's grandmother, using the technique his own mother taught him, the ice begins to thaw. His family arrives next, his mother immediately taking charge of the kitchen, while his father teaches Esteban the same card games he once taught Javier. The house fills with the smell of cooking and the sound of two families cautiously becoming one. When it's time for his toast, Javier looks around at the gathered faces. Some familiar, some new, all part of the legacy he should have been building all along. A year ago, he begins, "I thought I knew what success looked like. I measured it in square footage and stock prices." He meets Sarah's eyes across the room. "I was wrong. Success is standing here with my son, with both our families, remembering who I am and where I come from." Esteban slips his small hand into Javier's, and Sarah's expression softens into something that might be forgiveness. Outside, the Miami sun sets on the first day of a new year, and Javier Torres finally understands that sometimes losing everything is the only way to find what matters most. The morning sun filters through the worn curtains of Javier's childhood bedroom, casting familiar shadows across faded baseball trophies and family photos. He sits on the edge of his old twin bed, the frame creaking under his weight, a sound that takes him back to restless teenage nights spent dreaming of success. Now, those dreams taste different in his mouth. His fingers trace the edge of an old photo on the nightstand. His younger self grins back at him, arms slung around his parents at his high school graduation. The gleam in his eyes speaks of ambition, untainted by compromise, of a future unlimited by the modest surroundings of his youth. That boy would barely recognize the man Javier has become. Or perhaps he would recognize him too well. The scent of his mother's cooking drifts upstairs, carrying memories of Sunday mornings and the simple joy of belonging. Maria Torres still makes arroz con pollo the same way she did when Javier was young, each ingredient measured by heart rather than recipe. The familiar aroma grounds him, reminding him of what he once took for granted in his rush to prove himself to the world. He pulls a crisp sheet of paper from his briefcase, expensive stationery, watermarked with his company logo. The irony doesn't escape him as he begins to write. "Dear Esteban," the words come slowly at first, each one weighted with years of absence. But as his pen moves across the paper, something breaks loose in his chest. He writes about regret and hope, about the father he should have been and the one he wants to become. The letter isn't perfect. There are crossed out words and ink smudges where his hand trembled, but it's honest in a way Javier hasn't allowed himself to be in years. When he finishes, he reads it over once, then folds it carefully and slips it into his jacket pocket. The paper crinkles against his heart, a constant reminder of his promise. Downstairs, Maria works at the kitchen counter, her movements practiced and efficient. She looks up as Javier enters, her eyes catching the subtle signs of emotion on his face. "Estás bien, mijo?" "Sí, mamá." Javier rolls up his sleeves, moving to help her with the cooking. His expensive watch catches the light, a sharp contrast to the humble kitchen. "What can I do?" Maria hands him an onion and a knife without comment, but her lips curve in a slight smile. They work in comfortable silence, the rhythm of chopping and stirring creating its own kind of peace. Finally, she speaks. "Love is patient, Javier. Like good cooking, you cannot rush it." Javier's knife pauses mid-chop. "What if I've waited too long? What if?" "Then you start where you are." Maria's voice is firm but gentle. "Your father wasn't perfect either, you know, but he showed up every day, tried his best. That's what matters." The mention of his father, gone 5 years now, tightens Javier's throat. He nods, unable to speak for a moment. When they finish cooking, Maria helps him load the food into his car, the containers filling the back seat with warmth and promise. "Gracias, mamá," Javier says, hugging her goodbye. Her familiar scent, cooking spices and the same perfume she's worn for decades, wraps around him like a blessing. "Ve con Dios," she whispers, patting his cheek. "Remember who you are." The drive to Sarah's house gives him time to think, to rehearse the words he needs to say. But as he pulls up to her modest home, seeing the papel picado already strung across the backyard and the warm glow of string lights in the early evening, all his practice speeches evaporate. Sarah meets him at the door, her expression carefully neutral. She's wearing a simple sundress, her dark hair loose around her shoulders. So different from Emilia's calculated elegance, yet somehow more beautiful for its authenticity. "You're early," she says, but there's no criticism in her tone. "I thought I could help set up." Javier gestures to the food in his car. "Mamá sent her arroz con pollo." Something softens in Sarah's face at the mention of Maria. She always did make the best. She calls over her shoulder, "Esteban, come help your father with the food." The word father still catches in Javier's chest, but watching Esteban bound down the front steps, his face lighting up at the sight of the food containers, makes it feel more real, more earned. Together, they carry everything to the backyard, where Sarah's family is already gathering. The setup passes in a blur of activity, arranging chairs, setting out food, stringing more lights as the sun begins to set. Javier notices how Esteban shadows him, mimicking his movements, asking questions about everything. The boy's curiosity reminds Javier of himself at that age, before he learned to guard his wonder behind ambition. As more guests arrive, the backyard fills with the mix of English and Spanish that feels like home, punctuated by laughter and the clinking of glasses. Javier watches Esteban run between groups of relatives, accepting hugs and treats with easy affection. The sight stirs something protective in his chest, a fierce desire to preserve this simple joy, to never let his son feel he needs to prove his worth. The moment comes after dinner, as the sky deepens to purple and the string lights create their own constellation overhead. Javier stands, glass in hand, and conversations quiet naturally, a habit from years of commanding rooms. But this time, his power suit and practiced charm are stripped away. He stands before them in rolled sleeves and honest vulnerability. "Thank you all for being here," he begins, his voice steadier than he feels. "Especially Sarah and her family for welcoming me today." He pauses, finding Esteban's face in the crowd. The boy watches him with unguarded interest, Sarah's hand resting protectively on his shoulder. 7 years ago, I made choices that I thought would lead to success. I measured that success in square footage and stock prices, in the height of my buildings and the size of my accounts. Javier's voice catches, but he pushes through. I was wrong. The admission hangs in the air, heavy with truth. Success isn't something you can build alone. It's not found in boardrooms or bank statements. It's here, in family, in love, in the courage to admit when you've lost your way. He turns to face Sarah and Esteban directly. I lost my way, but standing here today, seeing the amazing young man my son is becoming, thanks to his mother's strength and wisdom, I know what real success looks like. Esteban's eyes are wide, drinking in every word. Sarah's expression remains guarded, but Javier catches the slight tremor in her hand as she squeezes their son's shoulder. I can't change the past, Javier continues, but I can promise this. From today forward, I will be the father Esteban deserves, the man I should have been 7 years ago. Not because of obligation, but because loving you both, being part of this family, is the greatest success I could achieve. When he finishes, the silence stretches for a heartbeat before Esteban breaks from Sarah's hold and moves toward him. The boy tugs at his sleeve, looking up with earnest hope. Can we play soccer tomorrow? In the park? The simple request brings unexpected tears to Javier's eyes. He kneels to Esteban's level, aware of every watching eye, but focused only on his son's face. Yes, he promises. Tomorrow and any other day you want. Esteban's smile could light up the Miami skyline. The murmur of approval from the gathered family members washes over them like a warm breeze, but Javier barely notices. He's too caught up in memorizing his son's face, storing away this moment of pure connection. Later, as the party continues around them, Sarah draws him aside. They stand in the quiet shadow of her garden, the sounds of celebration creating a gentle backdrop. Her expression is serious but not cold. That was a beautiful speech, she says finally. It was the truth. Truth is a start. Sarah's voice holds years of careful protection, of learning to raise their son alone. But Esteban needs consistency, Javier. He needs a father who shows up not just for the big moments, but for homework and scraped knees and bad days. I know. Javier meets her gaze steadily. I'm not asking for everything to be fixed overnight. I'm asking for a chance to prove day by day that I can be that father, that I want to be. Sarah studies him for a long moment, then nods slowly. One step at a time, she agrees, for Esteban's sake. The weeks that follow test Javier's commitment in ways his business success never did. Eduardo Rodriguez, Emilia's father, makes good on his threats, spreading rumors that damage Javier's reputation in their circle. Investors pull out of projects, forcing him to scale back operations dramatically. But in the midst of professional chaos, Javier finds an unexpected peace. He coaches Esteban's soccer team on weekends, the familiar rhythms of the game bringing father and son closer. They spend Sunday afternoons in the park where Javier played as a child, and together they plant a young oak sapling, a symbol of their growing bond. "Will it get as tall as you, Papa?" Esteban asks, patting soil around the tree's base. "Taller," Javier promises, watching his son's careful attention to the task. "Much taller, but it needs time and care to grow strong." "Like us?" Esteban's insight startles a laugh from Javier. "Exactly like us, mijo." From her spot on a nearby bench, Sarah watches their interaction. The walls around her heart haven't completely fallen, but they're developing doorways, windows, places where trust might grow. She sees how Javier has traded his designer suits for casual clothes that can handle dirt and grass stains, how he never checks his phone when Esteban is speaking, how he's learning to listen instead of direct. One morning over coffee, they discuss the future. The kitchen is warm with sunlight, and Esteban's drawings cover the refrigerator, a gallery of their growing family story. "We could do something regular," Javier suggests carefully. "Family outings every Sunday?" Sarah considers this, stirring her coffee thoughtfully. "That might work," she agrees, "but let's take it week by week. No pressure, no expectations, just showing up." "I can do that," Javier says, and for the first time in years, he feels truly capable of keeping his word. The real test comes during a local festival, months into their new arrangement. They sit together on Sarah's porch, Esteban between them, watching fireworks paint the sky in bursts of color. Each explosion draws gasps of delight from their son, his small hands gripping theirs tightly. In the flickering light, Javier catches Sarah's eye over Esteban's head. The guard in her expression has softened, replaced by something that might be hope. It's not the fairy tale ending he once chased, but it's real, built on humility, patience, and the daily choice to show up for love. The next afternoon, Javier and Esteban walk hand in hand through the park, checking on their oak sapling. The tree has grown several inches, its leaves reaching toward the sun with quiet determination. Esteban chatters about school, soccer, and his dreams of being both an astronaut and a veterinarian, while Javier listens with the full attention he once reserved for million-dollar deals. "Can we visit the tree every week?" Esteban asks, his free hand tracing the smooth bark. "To make sure it's growing right?" Javier squeezes his son's hand gently, feeling the weight of the moment. "Yes," he promises, "we'll watch it grow together." And in that simple exchange, Javier Torres, once defined by his ambition to touch the sky, finds his true measure of success. Not in the heights he's reached, but in the depths of love he's finally learned to nurture. Thank you so much for watching and listening to our story. Your time and support mean the world to us. If this video resonated with you, please share your thoughts in the comments below. We'd love to hear what you think. Don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to our channel for more inspiring content. Your engagement helps us grow and continue sharing meaningful stories. See you in the next video.